My name is Hannah, and I'll be teaching economics this summer. Just to give you a bit of information about myself, I have economics degree from Emory University. I also have a teaching degree from University of Sunderland from the UK. And I worked as an economics teacher from British International School in Shanghai, Yaocheng International School in Shanghai, Dulwich College in Seoul, and Prime International School in Thailand. So today what I want to do is I want to go over monopoly, the topic on the monopoly. So the way I would introduce this idea to students is to talk about the game. The game is quite familiar to a lot of the students, and I'm sure a lot of the students have also played this game before. So I'll first ask the students how one becomes a monopolist and try to get some ideas and get some feedbacks from the students, get them engaged in the classroom. And this can be due to the fact that somebody can become a monopolist because they have the most control in the industry, or they become the industry, or they also are able to place barriers entering the industry and also having access to economies of scale, which this idea is going back to some of the theories of the profit, revenue, and the cost. And also there's a fun part of negotiation from playing the games. So about the assumptions of the model of monopoly. So there is only one firm producing the product. So the firm is the industry. A lot of the students had this idea about the monopoly normally from the game. And because of that, they think that there's only one company that is controlling the whole industry, which this idea is correct to some degree, but it's also not. It's normally about 30% of the industry of the market share is owned by one company, or at least that's the minimum. There's also barriers to entry to the market, which prevents the firms from entering the industry, and they are able to maintain the monopolistic power. This can be done through, for example, patent or buying out. So I think patent is something that a lot of the students can relate to, because patent, like for example, is given to a lot of pharmaceutical companies for inventing a new type of drug, which gives them a right to be the only seller of that drug in the industry for up to, like, let's say 15 years. So the company is able to make so much money, and sometimes they can actually abuse that power of overcharging the price of necessary product. Then in this case, then we can talk about how this can become a bit of a market failure in an industry. And of course, as a consequence of barriers to entry, the monopolist is able to make abnormal profit in the long run. So the degree of a company having a monopolistic power really depends on how the industry is defined. I would probably get students to talk about their own relevant examples, then going into a big company examples yet, just because I want the students to be able to relate to these situations. So it could be like, in this case below, suggest which ones are monopolies and also define the width of the industry that you're assuming. So canteen in your school, number one. So can canteen in the school be a monopoly? And I want the students to be able to express what their understanding of monopoly is by making this relevant to their experience, because a lot of the times the students are not able to leave the school campus to have lunch unless some schools do allow it, in that case, then it's not exactly a monopoly for the canteen. But a lot of the schools don't allow the students to leave. So therefore, canteen is the only provider of the food in the school. So in that case, they become the monopoly. Of course, wherever city they're located in, I'm sure canteen is not going to be the only food provider in the whole of the neighborhood or the country. However, given the context, being a student at the school who cannot leave the school campus during school hours, then it becomes a monopoly. Another example, before I move on, is a doctor. Like, let's say normally if students, a lot of students live in major countries, like major cities like Shanghai or Seoul, and in that case, there's going to be a lot of clinics available, and in that case, of course, the doctor is not going to be the monopolist. There's going to be lots of competition. So I'll get the students to get them to think about their own experience to make that relevant to the theory of monopoly. And now I'm going to be talking about the sources of a monopoly power and barriers to entry. First of all, the idea about the economies of scale, this goes back to the cost theory, which the students will have that knowledge beforehand. In this case, the firms are able to reduce the cost of the production because they produce in such a large scale. And as a result of that, they are able to increase the profit in the long run. If the monopoly is large enough, then it's applicable. But if the monopoly is a small scale, then they're not going to be producing too much. In that case, they're not going to be experiencing economies of scale. And any firm that is wishing to enter the industry, most likely, if it's a startup, like I said, they're not going to have the economies of scale. The second idea is that the firm can be a natural monopoly. So what this means is that the whole industry is a natural monopoly only if there's economies of scale that can be supported by one firm. So in the simple context I can give is that government-owned companies like water companies or electricity company, those will be perfect examples for monopoly. Why? Because only one firm can support the whole industry. So to give an illustration of this diagram, what we see here is a demand curve of monopolistic company that is producing demand curve, and we see the long run aggregate supply curve intersecting at the point A and B. So essentially, because this is the long run average cost curve, and this is a demand curve, the company is able to generate the profit from Q1 to Q2. Now, this is only one company, but if there is another company that enters the market, what's going to happen is that the demand curve for the monopolistic firm is going to decrease to the left. And as you can see, you don't see any intersection with the long run average cost curve. Why? Because now the cost has gone up so much that it's not able to make profit for both companies that are operating in this industry. So based on the concept that we just covered, I want to do one question. Using a diagram, explain the concept of natural monopoly. So if a student were to get a question like this will be like a common question for paper 1, type A question. I would help the students to formulate how to answer questions like this. help them with definition first. And it's an industry. An industry is a natural monopoly if there are only enough economies of scale available to support one firm. So for example, utility companies such as electricity and water are considered natural monopolies since it has economies of scale to support the industry. So in this case, we are talking about the example here. Oops. And I also encourage the students to draw a diagram to support their theory or the idea, and get them to explain the diagram in the accurate way. One thing that a lot of the students struggle with for the first year is how to describe the diagram accurately, and it's not that difficult. It's just that in economics, the examiners expect the students to explain the diagram in a specific way, and it's not that difficult at all. And then a lot of the idea comes back from the textbooks, because a lot of the textbook authors are like chief IB examiners. Yes. So according to the diagram, the industry has a demand curve D1 and long run average cost curve faced by the monopolist, long run average cost curve. And at D1, monopolist is able to make abnormal profit by producing output between A and B at Q1 and Q2 because average revenue is greater than the average cost for that range of the output. However, if a new firm enters industry, then the demand curve will shift to the left, as shown at D2. And in this case, it will be difficult for both firms to even make normal profits because obviously the cost curve is way above the demand curve at every level of the output. So this is it for the just a demo practice, and I hope you now have clear understanding of how I will be teaching for the summer session. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.